through the Community Action Partnership with Brenda Eichhoff Johnson. And through both of those organizations and operations, we recognized we needed to have really somebody on campus, and so there's a property manager, as Kim Summerall Wright said, that lives on the campus, and it's got the day-to-day oversight, can interact with the tenants, and just really make sure that the property is maintained all the way from irrigation issues to water issues to anything with something that goes wrong with an alarm in the evening. But besides that, the Housing Authority has really brought these new programs, and that's what Kim Summerall had shared with you all the 1st of August. Some of the new programs, besides Healthcare for the Homeless, which maintains its site up there, they've brought in quite a bit with GED training. They've done a lot with the community gardens. They've really developed very unique housing opportunities for our low-income population that helps from getting them off the streets and out of shelters into what we call transitional housing, and ultimately getting them to a point where they can have jobs. We've got daycare on the campus. They've got public transportation on the campus. Get them out so that they can transition into either owning or having an apartment. So it is a very important function for the city to have such a great asset in the form of Life Steps Campus. The contract that was initiated in December of 2014, and I'll just read from my memo. In accordance with the contract, the Casper Housing Authority may put a written request before council for the renewal of the contract, provided it is submitted before September 15th of the current term. They did submit that, and that letter was attached to all of you. And then staff has recommended that we do continue with the Housing Authority. Joy Clark has worked intimately with them for the last 5 years, as has myself. But also we've had council liaisons that have worked with the Casper Housing Authority on some of those projects. So I know Councilman Pacheco, as well as now Councilman Bates, has worked with the Housing Authority. And I think, Councilman Johnson, were you ever with that one?
I was not.
You're just multitasking otherwise. Okay. So currently there's no financial arrangement with them. They run the campus. We have utilized HUD funds over the years for updates, but they also receive a 1-cent investment to keep the campus maintained on behalf of the city. So there is not money into a contract that we have with them. They are subsidized fairly through HUD and some of the Section 8 housing vouchers. So that is what I'm looking for direction tonight. Questions also as to whether we should move forward with renewing the contract.
Comments, questions for Liz about renewal? Bob?
You're happy? Been a successful move for us, I think, sounds like.
Your Honor, Councilman, yes, we are very pleased. And the residents are, and you go up there and it is just a very attractive campus, but it's very homey. And with the community kitchen that I know a lot of us have been in, it's a very nice home environment. It is not, it's not a shelter, or it's not public housing as we would consider in more of the antiquated visuals that we have. It's a home.
Anything you want to add, Ray? About your
Yeah, I just
experiences?
would vouch for it. I think Kim and the board and the staff, and I know I've expressed this to Liz multiple times, they've done a really excellent job running it efficiently. So I know the time on being the liaison over there has been was great. And I really enjoyed working with them, and they did a nice job. So
Thank you.
I know Ken's been seeing with them now, but my experience in the last 3 years were pretty good. So.
Any concerns on your part, Ken, based on your
No,
experiences?
not even a little. Nope. They just did the budget or just audited the full-fledged audit, and everything came back really, really well. So they're doing good. So yeah, no concerns.
Everybody okay with moving forward on this to renew? Okay, sounds good.
Thank you all.
Okay, any concerns about tonight's agenda, questions?
I might have one.
Yes.
I guess on the amendment to the public health. So are these license fees, are those in addition to public health inspection fees? So like $75 for swimming pools, food manufacturers, is that an additional fee on top of what they pay inspected by the health department?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, that would be in addition to what they are charged by the health department. But it wouldn't be multiple charges on our behalf for those inspections. It would be one on our side, one on our side.
So one fee for the license and one fee separate for the health department.
That's my understanding. Liz, do you have a feel for that beyond what I understood? I think that's how it works.
Okay, Steve?
The change order. Have you folks already discussed that before? It's change order number 1 for $38,186, page 215.
Refresh my memory, Steve.
It's for
The building.
the building, for the foundation at the landfill.
I thought we did not. Can you get us up to speed on it?
Your Honor, Counsel, I don't believe this councilman's heard this change order request before.
Okay, no, if they had, I was gonna just stay out of it and abstain at the meeting tonight. Since this is the first time for everybody, I have several questions then. And I just didn't wanna. Okay, first of all, who designed the foundation initially? And why wasn't this caught when the foundation and the building were initially put together?
This is a new, Your Honor, council member, this is a new building.
Right.
New construction.
Yeah,
And they, solid waste staff had seen this type of installation at other facilities where it's somewhat of a portable type of situation where you can actually take the blocks off, move the building, reset the blocks to have somewhat of a permanent foundation. It was determined that we got it designed by Pillar Structural Engineering, but then it was determined that in the process of actually physically moving this to different locations, it was just not going to be practical or feasible. So they went with a permanent in-ground foundation.
so basically, Pillar looked at the first foundation,
Yes.
but someplace along the line, it was missed that this wasn't going to be as portable as what it was.
That's essentially correct, Your Honor.
Okay, and then, secondly, has this already been done?
No,
Okay.
no.
Questions? Andrew, about the change order? Kristen?
Just for my clarification, because obviously I'm not in construction.
So,
So they haven't started on this building construction yet, correct?
Correct. Well, I think they got the blocks and they have to now return those blocks and that kind of stuff.
Okay, I was just gonna ask, if they hadn't started on it, then the time extension of 167 days seems somewhat excessive, but I guess if they have to kind of backtrack on the work they have done and then start
Yeah.
back again, then that would maybe make
And
sense.
it's just a matter of, you're right, some of the domino effect. They went
Okay.
down one path,
Yeah.
now they're changing paths.
Yeah,
Technically, they're already past their original deadline, because it says in there it was supposed to be done by what, the end of June?
the
Your Honor,
foundation was.
Councilman, now you're just in my memory, but you may well be correct.
Bob?
Yeah, as I recall, this is, right now, we're set up just to have a footer and a wall up the side, dirt floor.
Yes.
Yeah, because you don't want to run that machine on the
Yeah.
concrete.
Yeah, the ending of the first paragraph on
Yeah.
the summary, June 1 was the initial deadline.
Are we okay with this?
Yeah.
Okay, with the explanation. Okay. Anything else on tonight's agenda?
Oh.
Steve?
Whoever did it, Andrew, city manager, thank you. The
Oh, you're
stoplight at 13th, the stoplight at 13th and McKinley is now flashing yellow.
All right. Mike, you had something for tonight.
Yeah, I did, and specific, I think everybody's aware of the explosion that we had, you know, and I was talking with Tim and with Chief Solberg for a few minutes. It's, you know, building explosions are not, you know, they're relatively not all that uncommon. But I gotta tell you, this is the first and only one in, you know, in 40 years that I've been kind of paying attention to such things around here, where a building is just gone. That was a very, very extraordinary event yesterday. Usually it lifts up off the foundation and might pancake or something like that. But anyway, though, I thought that not only the fire department and police department yesterday just did a very extraordinary job with this, but also all the other city agencies, sanitation, street department, and everybody else, and all the other agencies that responded really did so in the highest traditions. And so what I would like to do is, and I realize this kind of this would be a deviation from the agenda tonight, but I would like to see us adopt a resolution along these lines. Whereas yesterday, September 2nd, 2019, a Casper neighborhood, spelled correctly now.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Was racked by the catastrophic explosion and total destruction of a residence and significant damage to the surrounding area. And further, whereas the Casper Fire Department, Police Department, Street Department, Sanitation Department, Engineering Department, and multiple other agencies and departments responded to this very challenging and dangerous situation. And further, whereas all responding agencies and personnel conducted themselves with great professionalism, resulting in no injuries and the rapid stabilization of a very challenging and dangerous situation. Now therefore be it resolved that the Casper City Council extends profound gratitude on behalf of all Casper residents to all responding agencies for a job well and safely done.
John, how would we go about doing this evening? Is it possible for us to introduce a resolution, or does it have to be on the agenda at the time?
For resolution, we can just suspend the rules and
When would you recommend that we do that? We just put that on at the beginning of our agenda to this evening after we approve minutes and bills?
I think so. It could be either resolution or resolution.
Or maybe even during council bright spots or something.
That's not a bad idea.
Just
Not sure the
after we
neighbors-
do the bright spot, just suspend the rules, see if there's a vote to suspend the rules, and then let you read it, and then just take a vote. Kick me if I kind of seem like I'm missing this. Just don't forget your pledge of allegiance. Especially on Constitution. Okay, well done, Mike, thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
I got a couple things to tell people about if no one else has anything else, okay? I attended the CATA meeting this past week, and there's a lot going on. CATA is very interested in pursuing opportunities in the aerospace industry. And they are organizing a conference in October where we're going to have some fairly serious representation from the Air Force because they're rebuilding all of the silos down by Cheyenne. And there's work for local contractors to be involved in all of this, and yet they don't really have the connections in place to understand how to access or how to get involved in that process. And so, so it's really a big deal. And Charles Walsh believes that there's some long-term possibilities for Casper, not necessarily to be the high-tech end of the aerospace industry, but some of the supportive work that has to be done to build parts and be involved, like you say, in the restabilization of these silos and other work that has to be done in the state. And so this is your CATA group in action, trying to stimulate business and bring business to our local contractors. Also heard during that meeting from two organizations, the Seton House is developing, I passed this around, Seton House is developing a job training program for their residents and really for any people that need job training assistance and job coaching. And so this is a mission that they're taking on, and they're basically using a program that's developed in other places and has some pretty good evidence behind it as far as getting people back into the workforce who've been unemployed for a long time, and getting them the confidence and the training that they need to get out into the workforce. And so this is something that they're fundraising for, because basically in order to do that you have to have positions and training, and you have to essentially buy into the franchise to implement this program. We also heard from the Olivia Caldwell Foundation, and they are working hard to bring pediatric specialty care into Casper on a clinic basis, and the Mountain View Hospital is available to host these clinics. And so the Olivia Caldwell Foundation is about childhood cancer treatment, and they're working with the Denver Children's Hospital to bring these specialists in and trying to coordinate that with the medical center. And so pretty exciting stuff. So if you can imagine how horrible it is to have a kid with cancer and then have to go down to Denver, and you're separated from your support system, and you're having to spend money to motel rooms and meals, and you're not home. And so if these kids can get their treatment here, it's a pretty big deal. So we want to give them some support. Let's see. What else is going on with CADA? There's the CADA group is trying to develop some independent operation of the Innovation Center. It has been under the auspices of UW, and they're working to establish that. A couple other things. The Disability Council is meeting regularly once a month. They had a meeting on Robert's Rules of Order, which unfortunately I couldn't attend. But their next step is to really develop a strategic plan, and I expect we will see them at some point in the not too distant future coming before us saying, here's a few things that the city could do to really make this city more accessible, and here's some of the barriers that the city could remove for people with disabilities. So we'll probably hear from them at some point. Let's see, what else? Went to the Self-Help Center board meeting, and I'll pass around some information for those of you who aren't aware. That is our domestic violence support agency, and they have a shelter for women that really need a place, just need to get away and have a safe place to be, women and their families typically. And they've been renting a space in Evansville, and they're working to fundraise to build their own space. And obviously a very expensive process, and so they're going to be involved in their own fundraising project to get that shelter built. And a lot of what they do is outpatient support and groups on domestic violence, treating both abusers and victims of abuse. Then I also attended the Youth Crisis Center board meeting, and I got pamphlets from them. The city is a regular supporter of the Youth Crisis Center. We helped build that facility with the county about 8 or 10 years ago, and they have both a group home for long-term care. It's not a treatment facility so much as just a regular group home. It's really the only group home available in Casper for teens, and then they also do short-term crisis stay. I'm sure the chief can vouch for the Youth Crisis Center as a place to take kids when it's just not safe for kids to be in that family situation. There's too much conflict and risk of violence, and to get those kids in a safe place. We are, let's see, what else? Oh, we're also working on the Balloon Fest and seeing if we can coordinate with Riverton to make sure that we can have those functions at different weekends, because we had a conflict last year and the balloonists had to decide which one they wanted to attend. So we're trying to solve that problem along the way. So I think that's it. Carter and I were just talking briefly that the gas play out at Monita is going to, we talked about this earlier, is definitely going to have some impact on Casper, and we are going to be explaining those impacts and asking for some assistance to deal with those impacts. And that process is also ongoing. So I think that's it.
Region 4 meeting on Thursday?
Pardon me?
Region 4 meeting on Thursday?
Yeah, so thank you for bringing that up. Yes, we are hosting that at Hogadon from 3 to 7. I don't know if it'll go that long. It starts at 3, doesn't it?
I think so.
3 o'clock. And it would be great to have some Casper representation there. And for those of you who aren't aware, that we had the opening of the mural, the James Reeb Memorial mural that is at the back end of the Wold building between the Davis Street Station and the parking garage. The mural committee hopes to have murals in that entire horseshoe area with the idea of making that an attractive space. One solution to the parking challenges of the Davis Street Station is to utilize the garage more. But we want to emphasize that there's an easy way to walk from the garage to the station, and making that a more attractive place will hopefully increase people's awareness of that. And the Reeb, that presentation was very impressive. I think we had somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 people there. And James Reeb is a Casper kid who is a real hero of the civil rights movement, and often there's a lot of people in Casper don't know anything about James Reeb. And I just think that should be more publicly, we need more publicity of who he was and what he did. Civil Rights Act passed shortly after he was murdered, and that event played a big role in getting that act passed. So, okay, so I think that's it. Been a busy couple weeks. Anybody have anything else to report before we go out there? Okay. Good. Take a couple minutes. I now call the September 3rd, 2019 regular council meeting to order. Would council members please denote your presence by depressing your yes switch?
Oh, sorry.
49ers.
All council members are present.
My bad.
In so many ways.
I don't know how that even happened.
Council meetings also are televised and can be viewed on cable channel 192. Could I get a volunteer to come to the podium and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance this evening? Since this is Constitution Week, some brave soul. Would you? Thank you, ma'am. Could we get your name, please, before we start?
Rosalind Brenda.
Thank you, Rosalind. Whenever you're ready.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The chair would entertain a motion to approve by minute action the minutes of the August 20, 2019 regular council meeting as published in the Casper Star Tribune, August 26, 2019.
So moved.
Moved by Councilman Pacheco, seconded by Councilman Hopkins. Any amendments to those minutes? Please cast your vote, and please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passed.
Thank you. The chair would entertain a motion to approve by minute action the minutes of the August 27, 2019 special council meeting as published in the Casper Star Tribune on September 1st, 2019.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Vice Mayor Johnson, seconded by Councilwoman Lutz. Any amendments to those minutes? Please cast your vote. Please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passed.
Chair would entertain a motion to approve by minute action the minutes of the August 27, 2019 executive session.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councilman Friel, seconded by Vice Mayor Johnson. Any amendments to those minutes? Or did it?
Mr. Mayor, the time and the person that seconded need to be switched at the very bottom of the page.
Okay. Can we do that, Mr. City Manager? Absolutely. And we can still pass this as amended. Please cast your vote, and please record the vote.
Motion, with all voting aye, motion to pass the minutes as amended passed.
Thank you. Chair would entertain a motion to approve by minute action the September 3rd, 2019 bills and claims as audited by City Manager Napier.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Vice Mayor Johnson, seconded by Councilman Huber. Any abstentions to those bills and claims? Please cast your vote, and please record the vote.
with all, I thought you were testing me. With all members voting aye, motion passed.
Is that me? Okay. Okay. Okay, it's time for our bright spots in the community, and we are pleased to welcome members of the Wyoming Society of the United States Daughters of 1812 tonight. This group has asked for proclamations acknowledging Star-Spangled Banner Day and Constitution Week. Would you please come forward and introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Susan Haynes, and I am the chapter president of the local chapter, Bison chapter.
Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Rosalind Grenfell. I'm first vice president for the Wyoming Society of U.S. Daughters of the War of 1812 and a member of the Bison chapter.
Thank you. Would either of you like to say anything about these proclamations we're about to read this evening?
Well, during the War of 1812 was when the Star-Spangled Banner was written by Francis Key Scott, and one of the proclamations is for Star-Spangled Banner Day, which is September 14th. And of course, we also honor Constitution Week, Constitution Day as U.S. citizens. Thank you.
And would you both come up, please, and we'll stand in front of our logo, and I will read the proclamations this evening. The first proclamation is regarding Constitution Week, and it states as follows. Whereas our founding fathers, in order to secure the blessing of liberty for themselves and their posterity, did ordain and establish a Constitution for the United States of America, which became law 231 years ago. And whereas the U.S. Constitution is complex enough to keep our three branches of government accountable, broad enough to encompass our diverse society, and simple enough that anyone who sits down to read its words can understand that it puts the power to impact government in the hands of the American people. And whereas the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. The 10th Amendment balances the division of power between the states and the federal government, e pluribus unum, out of many, one. And whereas our founding fathers trusted that decisions impacting our day-to-day lives are best made by the governments closest to us, and this independence guaranteed to all American citizens should be celebrated during Constitution Week. Now therefore I, Charles Powell, Mayor of the City of Casper, Wyoming, do hereby proclaim this week, September 17th through the 23rd, 2019, as Constitution Week in our community, and urge all our citizens to read it, learn about its history, and reflect on the many benefits of our federal Constitution and American citizenship.
Thank you.
And the second resolution declares today Star-Spangled Banner Day and reads as follows. Whereas, during the War of 1812, Francis Scott Key, an American poet and lawyer, witnessed the Battle of Fort McHenry, which lasted throughout the night of September 13th. And whereas, by dawn's early light, on September 14th, the sight of the large flag with stars and stripes waving over Fort McHenry, signifying an American victory, inspired Francis Scott Key to compose the words to the poem, The Defense of Fort McHenry. And whereas, later the poem was set to music and became the Star-Spangled Banner. And on March 3rd, 1931, President Herbert Hoover signed Public Law 823, making it our national anthem. And whereas, the national anthem and the American flag have evolved to become the strongest symbols of the spirit and resolve of the American people over the last 2 centuries. And whereas, the National Society, United States Daughters of 1812, and the Bison chapter call for a day to observe the historical significance of the Star-Spangled Banner and to celebrate the words that Francis Scott Key penned in 1814. Now therefore, I, Charles Powell, Mayor of the City of Casper, do hereby proclaim September 14th, 2019 as Star-Spangled Banner Day in our community, and urge our citizens to recognize and celebrate the anniversary of the birth of our country's national anthem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And before we move on to our agenda, I would like to take a motion to suspend our rules to carry out another matter before us. I'm so moved. Do I have a second to suspend our rules?
Second.
Moved by Councilman Cathy, seconded by Councilman Hopkins, and this suspension will allow us to read a resolution and consider passage. And I believe Councilman Huber has the resolution that he is going to propose that we pass this evening. Go ahead, Councilman.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that most everyone's aware that yesterday a pretty extraordinary event occurred here in Casper. And so I would propose that we adopt this resolution. Whereas yesterday, September 2nd, 2019, a Casper neighborhood was racked by a catastrophic explosion and total destruction of a residence and significant damage to the surrounding area. And further, whereas the Casper Fire Department, Police Department, Street Department, Sanitation Department, the Building Division, the Engineering Department, and multiple other agencies and departments responded to this very challenging and dangerous situation. And further, whereas all responding agencies and personnel conducted themselves with great professionalism, resulting in no injuries and the rapid stabilization of a very challenging and dangerous situation. Now therefore be it resolved that the Casper City Council extends profound gratitude on behalf of all Casper residents to all responding agencies and personnel for a job well and safely done. So I would urge that we vote to suspend our rules and that we adopt this resolution. And so I think after we suspend the rules, then I'll move the adoption of this resolution.
Well, we've already suspended the rules, correct, Mr. Henley?
Actually, Your Honor.
Okay. So the motion was made by Councilman Cathy and seconded by Councilman Hopkins. Please vote on whether you would like to suspend the rules so that we can consider this resolution.
All members voting aye. Motion to suspend the rules passed.
And would Councilman Huber's reading of that be considered moving that we pass that?
Mr. Mayor, I would now move the adoption of the resolution that I just read.
Second?
Second.
Seconded by Vice Mayor Johnson. Any discussion regarding the resolution? Please cast your vote. And please record the vote.
All members voting aye. Motion passed.
Mr. Henley, do we need to take action then to get back into regular session, or does that happen automatically?
That goes automatically.
Thank you.
And excuse me, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Henley, I emailed the draft of that to you, which you should be getting, and if you wouldn't mind putting it in formal form so that the mayor can sign it or whatever.
Certainly.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you for doing that, Councilman Huber. I think the resolution says it all. Now is the time we invite anyone in the audience who wishes to speak with council to come forward. As stated on the first page of the agenda, we ask the following. Please identify yourself and your address. Please direct your questions and comments to me. No personal attacks on staff or council. Please keep your comments limited to 5 minutes. Is anyone here to speak to council this evening? Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mayor Powell. Dennis Steensland, 533 South Washington. I was under the impression earlier in the day that tonight was the night you were going to discuss and vote on the Plains Furniture sale. And I also picked it up in the paper. I have talked to a couple of the city people. I can't imagine how a council can even approach considering a bid for that property that's roughly $1,500,000 less than we've got invested in it as a taxpayer. I'm speaking as a taxpayer, and I've pretty much followed this since it started. I do believe there's maybe 4 council members that have a history on this, and the rest of you don't have a history. But anyway, I can't imagine why we would even consider selling that for $500,000. To me, it's $1 million and a $500,000 loss. It also has a contingency that I don't really understand, but I am going to research it before next council meeting. My understanding is next council meeting is when you will hear this and decide on it. I'm here to encourage you to study it for the week, all of you. That as a taxpayer, I'd be floored to think that we could eat $1,500,000 loss. I still think the property has value. It took some convincing way back when to think that it was worth $3 million, but I was convinced, and the council at that time was convinced. I still think it's a good, valuable piece of property. I do believe there's a conflict of interest with Mr. Howley being involved in trying to purchase the property. I don't quite understand their financing yet. I don't understand a 3-year to a 5-year development program. I don't understand why they want the little bit of parking to the north of, well, it'd be to the south of David Street Station, why that would be a contingency. I didn't understand right of first refusal. I think I do have a little bit of a handle on that. But I guess what I'm here for is to encourage all of you to think about that and talk to the ones that have been around. I picture Bob Hopkins, Charlie Powell, maybe Ray, maybe Johnson. So there's 4 votes right there. I don't want to see it go through as a council vote for that little amount of money, no matter if you've got to sit on it 1 year, 2 years, or whatever. I do believe it's a disservice to the public, to the citizens, to have one council spend $3 million, and then 5 years later, another council completely do away with that and take a $1,500,000 hit. That's at a minimum, I think. I think we've got more money invested in it, and it will cost us more than that. I hope to be able to talk to Carter and Mr. Henley and maybe Liz Becker, find out more where they're trying to go with this thing. Anyway, that's my concern tonight, and I'm hoping you guys will think about it hard and fast, rather than just come down here and vote to take that big of a loss.
And Mr. City Manager, that is on our agenda for 2 weeks from tonight, is that correct? To begin the process and have a public hearing?
Mr. Mayor, you're correct. September 17th would be the date that the purchase agreement would be considered. Council's already taken one formal step in a previous meeting. This would be the last formal step to this relinquishment process.
And the full proposal is in the work session packet from, what, 4 or 5 months ago? Is that, I don't remember exactly when, but all the details and renderings are in that proposal that we received, right?
Mr. Mayor, I think that's correct.
I wonder if Mr. Steensland and others would know, if we would be interested if we could make sure everyone knows where to look for that. Mr.
Would I be
Steensland?
privy to get a copy of that? Any citizen
That's
be?
what I was gonna suggest.
Yeah.
We get him a copy of that.
Okay. Sure.
No problem.
We can do that?
No
Okay.
problem, you bet.
Fair enough, we will get that to you. And those are all legitimate questions, by the way. So.
Okay, who do I talk to? Mr. Carter. Okay, I'm hoping you will consider this. I think it's a very, very disservice to the public to even consider it. But anyway, that's just one person's opinion. I've got the microphone now. I'm hoping somebody can hear it at home. I personally can't at home. But anyway, that's my reason for being up here, and I'll be back for the 17th meeting.
Okay.
With better information, I hope.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, just so that it's really clear to everybody listening and watching at home, that information, that whole proposal was in the, and you mentioned this, but I just want to reemphasize this to everybody. It was in the work session agenda from, what was that date, so that if people are that are watching or anything are interested?
You're not asking me, are you?
Well,
to identify the date?
You know, it was quite a while back, but it's all in one of the pre-meeting agendas in
work session.
back from in May.
Was it May? Okay.
And anybody that's watching at home or anywhere else, you know, can go back, and I'm sorry that, you know, I was deferring to Mr. Mayor because he knows a lot more than I do, if not everything. But it's all in there in one of those work session agendas.
Okay, I don't believe there's many of us in the public that dig into it that deep.
Yeah. Well,
there might be a handful, but
if anybody's interested in looking at the details of that, that's where they could go back and look, because it's all there. Yeah.
Okay, so you guys have had since May to consider this, and you've done a lot of thinking on it. You don't have your minds made up, I hope. So I wasn't aware it was from May. The paper article was the first I was aware of it, and I have.
City Manager, could we be sure to reference the date of the work session in the packet and when this item is listed on the agenda for 2 weeks from tonight?
Mr. Mayor, we absolutely can, but furthermore, we could reproduce those materials for this packet coming up so that those would be readily available in that means as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else here to speak to council this evening? Good to see you again, Mr. Giles. It's been a while.
Woody Giles, 290 East Magnolia. Mostly here to address the new members. I used to be a frequent flyer here. I probably attended more sessions than half the people on the council. And I just want to remind the council that Casper is not a place, it's a people. You know, your job is to take care of the people, look after their interests. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about the people of Casper. Late last fall, I received a memo from Natrona County. Actually, my wife received it, and she gave it to me. It stated that in Natrona County, there was 8,400 and change people below the poverty line. Now, I don't know what the poverty line is. You kind of heard of it before. But if you're $500 a year over the poverty line, then that you're not counted. So $10 a week is the difference, maybe being below the poverty line and being above the poverty line. So I don't know how many thousands of people there are that are $500 a year or $1,000 a year above the poverty line. I still think they're in terrible shape, but that's just me. The Natrona County School Board told me that approximately 40%, a little less, of the kids in our schools qualify for free or reduced lunches. I don't know what that means, but you take these two things together and it kind of looks like Casper is not exactly as rosy as sometimes articles in the paper say that our tax income is up and our, we're in great shape. No, we're not in great shape. We got 15, 20,000 people wondering where the hell a meal's coming from. And I've heard, I don't know how many times, we got to diversify our economy, we got to expand our economy. We give, I'm not sure the number, I've heard $400,000, $500,000 a year to CADA, and their job is to maintain and create and diversify and stimulate our economy. And their results, as near as I can recall, is Kmart, Macy's, Sears, Chipotle, Dress Barn. Really? So I made a few suggestions over the last few years. Charlie says there's other cities that are doing some things that are quite interesting. I think you ought to check it out. There's before and after studies that where building permits all of a sudden on the after part went way up and the dollar value of permits went way up. I think that's a clue about the state of an economy, as opposed to other places where building permits go down and non-existent. So I met the mayor, Mr. Charlie, I gave him some people to call, and he did, and took a lot of notes, and then I guess did you ever find your notes?
If you're asking for a status report, I did, about 6 weeks ago, I think, make a pitch to council that we set some time aside to talk about the very proposal that you are discussing. And I did get a majority vote to put that on our to-do list, to set aside some time to do
There's a guy in
that.
Philadelphia that has worked with a lot of cities in Pennsylvania and Connecticut, New Hampshire, and apparently seem to be getting good results. But you know, why don't you give this guy a call and see what he thinks, and he'd come up here and make a presentation. It's just information finding, and you had staff supposedly vet this guy, and I was told later that the staff was told to forget it, and so really, and so anyway, I haven't come here since the election because it seems like a waste of time, you know. Anyway, I'm terribly disappointed in the council and their lack. I mean, every meeting is liberty and justice for all, and then nothing. No research, no. I mean, what the hell? If I'm wrong, prove me wrong. You know, make a phone call.
It's on our list of items that we're going to.
Wouldn't that be? I'd sure like to be here, but.
Well, I have to have the majority of council agree to put it on the agenda.
Okay. So you want to make Casper better? Just have a vote. If you don't want to make it better, then just keep on doing what we're doing. That's all I had.
Questions for Mr. Giles? You're all familiar with what he's referring to? Okay.
Mr. Mayor? Mr. Giles? I don't have so much a question, but just a quick comment. Please don't feel that you or anybody else ever coming here to talk to us is a waste of time. You know, there are big limits to what we have the power to do and to not do, and what we can affect and what we can't affect. Just that we're not able to do some things, I know that I speak for every member of this council when I say that, you know, we take everything into account and consideration that everybody presents to us. There are some things that are just beyond what we can do. If people would just make me king and give me total power to do everything, the world would be perfect. But unfortunately,
I said, hey, you know, they're curing cancer in Atlanta, you know, make a phone calls, find out what they're doing. Maybe we can do it here. That's all I'm saying.
Well,
so far, zip.
I really,
except Charlie says they're going to vote. So
I really just wanted to emphasize to you and to everybody, please don't feel that just because we're not able to do what, you know, what you might think or what you might want, doesn't mean that we're not listening and trying to do things.
Well, the old timers on the council have heard this speech from me before. I'm mostly addressing the new people. I'd just like to think you could do a little better job. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Anyone else here to speak to council this evening? I now declare the public hearing open for the consideration of the vacation replat and zone change creating the Johnny J's addition. Mr. City Attorney, do you have exhibits?
Mayor, we have two exhibits. Exhibit number 1, correspondence from Liz Becker to J. Carter Napier dated August 30, 2019. And exhibit number 2, affidavit of publication, is published in the Casper Star-Tribune dated August 26, 2019. And I know that we've jumped over an item.
We'll go back to that.
Okay.
We'll get this one done first. Thank you. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. The basic impetus with regard to this request of the petitioner is to consolidate a number of lots into one, and accordingly, as the map would indicate,
clarify the zoning classification so that indeed that classification would be consistent among the proximity of the parcel here. As you can see, there are two classifications that are in the mix right now with regard to the makeup of the lots. You'll also note, as it relates to this picture here, that indeed this building no longer exists, which would allow for potential expansion of the petitioner's facilities. The request is to approve this agreement as well as a corresponding zone change that would change all of this to a C2 designation and eliminate the existing R3 designation.
Thank you. Council will now listen to public comment. And again, public hearing comments are limited to 5 minutes and no duplication of speakers, please. This time I would ask those individuals who wish to speak in favor of the issues involving the Johnny J's addition to please approach the lectern. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. I'm John Johnson, 1917 Rustic Court. This location is the site of Johnny J's Diner. So we've demoed the house that used to be our old office building. That's the subject of the replat. So we're asking that that parcel be included with the part that has Johnny J's on it and all the parking lots to be one plat. So.
Okay. Thank you. Questions for Mr. Johnson? Councilman Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Johnson, we had one person write and was kind of opposed to this, but the way I look at this, and I think the way P&Z may have looked at it, is you're actually increasing the parking that you're going to have for Johnny J's. Is that correct?
That is correct. It's a net gain of, I believe, 6 spaces. On the south side, those spaces would be, well, I'd call it nose to nose with the spaces on the or the north side. So, and then it's going to facilitate us putting a walk-in cooler, which we could do without this, without even have done that. We could have still, there's a shed back there and a garbage dumpster and stuff like that. But it'll facilitate us putting a new walk-in cooler on the back of the diner, which is desperately needed.
Okay. Thanks.
No other questions? Mr. Johnson, do you have any sense of how much on-street parking is used by your customers? Any sense of that is then no longer available to the, under your current configuration, that are available to the residents in the area? Is on-street parking necessary at times?
It is occasionally, but we also, so for employee parking, we rent a lot across the street, across 2nd Street from Mr. Keating for our employee parking, and then everything on and around Johnny J's is for the guest parking. I could be mistaken. I think maybe on the weekends it might get a little, we might use more on-street parking, but I think for the most of the time, it's usually everything that's just in front of our property, which would be on the west side of Johnny J's Diner and then would be in front of that building that we just demolished.
This would give you a little bit of relief from that.
So, yes.
Okay. Other questions for Mr. Johnson? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Is anyone else here to speak in favor of the issues involving the Johnny J's addition this evening? I would now ask those individuals who wish to speak in opposition to the issues involving Johnny J's addition to please approach the lectern. Is anyone here to speak in opposition? There being no others to speak for or against the issues involving the Johnny J's addition, I now declare the public hearing closed. Please read the ordinance by title only.
An ordinance approving a vacation, replat, subdivision agreement, and zone change, creating the Johnny J's addition subdivision.
Thank you. The chair would entertain a motion to approve on first reading the ordinance just read.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Hopkins, seconded by Councilman Pacheco. Discussion. Councilman Friel.
Your Honor, I'm in favor of this. The letter that we received, I believe, was from a person who was over on Kenwood Street, and they had concerns over there, but I don't know of any. This is on Elk Street, and I don't know of any issues that have ever been brought up there, so I really don't see a lot of validity to what their complaint was in the letter that they wrote. So I'm behind this. Other
discussion? Okay.
And it does seem that if there's going to be more off-street parking, that the residents will have an easier time finding a place to park in front of their homes. Any amendments? Please cast your vote. And please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passed.
I now declare the public hearing open for the consideration of the demolition lien for 1129 East C Street.
We need to go back up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you. Excuse me. Excuse me. Please strike that from the minutes. Please read the consent agenda title.
Establishing
Page 6.
September 17th, 2019 as the public hearing date for the consideration of new restaurant liquor license number 41, El Burro Loco, LLC, doing business as El Burro Loco, located at 2333 East Yellowstone Highway.
Thank you. The chair would entertain a motion to, by minute action, establish the public hearing date just read.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Cathy, seconded by Vice Mayor Johnson. Please cast your vote. And please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passed.
Okay. I now declare the public hearing open for the consideration of the demolition lien for 1129 East C Street. Mr. City Attorney, do you have exhibits?
Yes, Mayor. 2 exhibits. Exhibit number 1, correspondence from Liz Becker to J. Carter Napier dated August 21, 2019. And exhibit number 2, affidavit of publication, is published in the Casper Star Tribune dated August 26, 2019.
Thank you. Mr. City Manager, do you have a report?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, as you can see in the exhibit, the subject property at 1129 East C was ravaged by fire and stood in this condition for some time after the fire event. The idea was to work in concert with the ordinances and so forth available to us to remove the building, as the owners had not done so, but indeed agreed to allow the city to do so and have the effect of enacting a lien upon the city's action to do so, but also with regard to your approval of this resolution this evening. By virtue of your approval of this resolution this evening, we not only accept the report of the demolition costs as described in your packets, but also enact the lien against the property to recover the costs to the taxpayers in the neighborhood of $6,448.
Thank you. At this time, I would ask those, council will now listen to public comment. Public hearing comments are limited to 5 minutes. I would ask those individuals who wish to speak in favor of the lien to please approach the lectern. Is anyone here to speak in favor?
Sorry to come up here twice in the same night. My comment on this, and I'm in favor of the demolition of the place and whatever, but in the last 6 months, maybe 8 months, I've seen where the city has written off as bad debt liens on property. So I would wonder if this guy can't tear the building down himself. You put a lien against him for $6,000. You wait 3 years and he doesn't pay the lien, and then we write it off. That's what I've seen watching the newspaper or watching the council papers. Does that strike a bell with anybody, that we seem to have been writing off a lot of lien money over the last year?
Would you care to comment, Mr. City Manager?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I would probably have to do some research that would indicate which liens we've written off and which ones we've carried through the books over the years. But my experience has been that with these types of liens, it stays with the property and is recuperated upon transaction of this property to another property owner. And so my recommendation would be, moving forward, that retiring these liens, unless law would indicate otherwise, would not be a good idea. So to answer Mr. Steensland's question more directly, I'm not sure which we might be talking about here, but I'd be happy to look into it and report back to council if council would find that of interest.
But we do have methods to make the city whole in this situation.
Mr. Mayor, I would contend that indeed this is the means by which we keep the city whole for removing this blighted, attractive nuisance.
Lieutenant?
Perhaps there's some confusion here. We have written off a number of accounts from utilities, and that's a little different animal than a lien against property. And I guess my question for the city manager, are we a first lien holder or is there a mortgage on it?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, we do have high priority. Whether or not we're absolutely in first position, I would have to defer for additional inquiry into that question, but we do have high priority, therefore making this means very effective.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Huber?
Also, Mr. Steensland, I seem to recall that some of those liens that were written off were from really kind of a great many years ago, and they were from improvement districts and street assessments and some things like that. And I think those, and I'm out at the limit of my legal knowledge here, which is pretty limited, as everyone would know. But I think those kind of liens probably are a little bit less priority than I believe this kind of a lien would be. And so, but those ones that I remember writing off were ones that if you looked at them, you could see they were just the likelihood of ever collecting anything on them. You'd spend more money litigating it than what we were going to get for them. But I agree with what you're saying, that, yeah, why have a lien if you're not going to enforce it? But that's my recollection of at least some of those that we did write off some time back.
Yeah, so, well, to me, in my mind, no matter whether it's gas bill or water bill or a lien for tearing down or for cleaning up a yard, it's still an effort that the city's put out with taxpayers' dollars, and if they don't get it reimbursed, the taxpayers' dollars are thrown away if in fact they aren't pursued, you know. So that's where I come from. I consider myself a muddy guy. I watch my own money. I kind of like watching the city money. Anyway,
Just for your information, sorry to interrupt, Mr. Steensland, but there was an effort to pass a statute that would allow municipalities to place a lien based on non-payment of utilities, and that did not go through with the last legislative session, but it will be introduced again for the very reasons that you're suggesting, is that we have out-of-state property holders who don't pay their utilities, and we have no method of collection under current state law.
I see, yeah. Well, back to Johnny J's deal, just as a tidbit for me, we use that restaurant quite regular. We do park on Elk Street. There's 3 spaces there that are real handy for getting in the restaurant. He tore down a perfectly good house, one of the better looking houses in the neighborhood. Wow. And directly across the street is a house that's the next candidate for this here.
Well, point of order, that's a matter that's already been passed, so we're not discussing that any longer. Well, we'll discuss it again next week if you want to, or 2 weeks if you'd like to, on second reading.
Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak in favor of the lien on this property? Is anyone here to speak in opposition to the lien? There being no others to speak for or against the lien, I now declare the public hearing closed. Chair would entertain a motion to, by resolution, authorize the levying of a lien against real property located at 1129 East C Street.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Huber, seconded by Councilwoman Lutz. Any discussion of this matter? Any amendments? Please cast your vote. And please record the vote.
All members voting aye, motion passed.
Council will now discuss the ordinance for the zone change of 442 North Lennox Street. This item will be open for public comment and for discussion by council. Please read the ordinance on third reading by title only.
An ordinance approving a zone change for 442 North Lennox Street.
Chair would entertain a motion to approve on third reading the ordinance just read.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Pacheco, seconded by Councilman Friel. Council will now listen to public comment. Is anyone here this evening to speak on this matter? Any discussion amongst council? Could we give people a reminder of what this matter is about on 442 North Lennox? Mr. City Manager? Just to let everyone know what this is about on third reading before we let this matter pass.
Mr. Mayor, can I throw a lifeline to
Yes.
Ms. Becker, please? I can't remember exactly.
Your Honor, members of council, this is when the property owner, the female, came to you all, and it just over time that there had been one zoning on a piece of her property.
Oh, that's right, yes.
And we went back and researched because it was way before Craig and I were even with the city. So it had just been a kind of a mess that we were clearing up, and the property owner is just wanting to get it zoned the same way.
Thank you for that reminder.
Forward. Yep.
Yes. Any further discussion? Any amendments? Please cast your vote, and please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passed.
Council will now discuss the ordinance for the zone change of 1014 Glenarm Street. This item will also be open for public comment and for discussion by council. Please read the ordinance on third reading by title only.
An ordinance approving a zone change at 1014 Glenarm Street.
Chair would entertain a motion to approve on third reading the ordinance just read.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councilman Hopkins, seconded by Councilman Cathy. Council will now listen to public comment. Is anyone here to speak on this zone change? Any discussion amongst council? Okay. Any amendments? Please cast your vote, and please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passed.
Council will now discuss the ordinance amendments to Chapter 8.04 regarding businesses that affect public health. This item will be open for public comment and for discussion by council. Please read the ordinance on third reading by title only.
An ordinance amending Chapter 8.04.
Chair would entertain a motion to approve on third reading the ordinance just read.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Pacheco, seconded by Councilman Huber. Council will now listen to public comment. Is anyone here to speak on the amendments to Chapter 8.04? Any discussion from council? Any amendments? If not, please cast your vote, and please record the vote.
With council members Johnson and Lutz voting nay, motion passed.
Thank you. Council will now discuss the ordinance for the annexation and zoning of Green Valley Mobile Home Park. This item will also be open for public comment and for discussion by council. Chair, please read the ordinance on second reading by title only.
An ordinance approving the city-initiated annexation of the Green Valley Mobile Home Park comprising 14 acres, more or less, located at 2760 South Robertson Road.
Chair would entertain a motion to approve on second reading the ordinance just read.
So move.
Second.
Moved by Vice Mayor Johnson, seconded by Councilwoman Lutz. Council will again listen to public comment on this matter. Public comments are limited to 5 minutes. Is anyone here to speak on the annexation and zoning of Green Valley Mobile Home Park this evening? Discussion amongst council on this matter? Amendments? Please cast your vote, and please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passed.
Please read the consent resolutions by title only.
Item 13A1, approving the Title VI program as required by the Department of Transportation. Item 13A2, contract with for the Casper Area Wayfinding Master Plan with the Metropolitan Planning Organization and RDG Planning and Design. Change order number 1 with Western Plains Landscaping for the landfill compactors storage building project. An outside city, that was item 13A3. Item 13A4 is for outside city sewer service with MG Real Properties Limited. And item 13A5 is for the upgrading and maintenance of the 911 phone system, and it's a contract with Converge One, Inc.
Chair would entertain a motion to adopt the consent resolutions just read.
So move.
Second.
Moved by Vice Mayor Johnson, seconded by Councilman Pacheco. Mr. City Manager, would you like to comment on any of these matters before us?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Members of the council, I want to draw attention to the final item that the clerk read regarding the 911 phone system. This is a pretty exciting upgrade, not to mention, of course, a very needed upgrade with regard to putting in place a system that meets with our current needs and technological advancements that are very appropriate for a 911 system with the sophistication that ours has. I'm also very excited about some of the services that this will offer that we anticipate should be available by the end of the year. And perhaps it would please the council if we could demonstrate some of those once we have those services online.
Okay, thank you. Any abstentions or nay votes? Please cast your vote, and please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passed.
Please read the consent minute action title.
Purchasing one new Bobcat gas mower from Midland Implement.
Chair would entertain a motion to approve the consent minute action agenda item just read.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Friel, seconded by Councilman Hopkins. Please cast your vote, and please record the vote.
All members voting aye, motion passed.
This time we ask council members to bring forward relevant concerns or items of interest or report on recent activities. Councilman Pacheco, would you like to start us this evening?
Sure. I don't have much. I just wanted to remind everyone to be safe as school started today. So watch the little ones around the buses and walking to school. And I hope everybody, I'm sure all the kids were happy to be back and were excited to go to school. Okay, maybe not. But welcome back, and I hope they had a great first day.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Huber.
Nothing, thank you.
Councilman Friel.
I just think that we've had a lot of recent events, fires, it seems like has been the biggest thing, and I see there was a grass fire out west of town yesterday. The Pedro Mountain, I'm not quite sure where that's at right now, but I know there's a lot of people impacted by that and a lot of loss. It seems like it's taking place out there, so I just want to put that out there, and if people can help out in any way, they most certainly should. We should all step up and help out where we can. That's it.
Vice Mayor Johnson.
In honor of Constitution Week, I would just urge people to actually pick it up and read it, and also to read the Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers, because it gives you a lot of insight into the how and why the Constitution was drafted and why certain things were put in and why certain things were not. It's very interesting. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Councilman Hopkins.
Nothing, thank you, Your Honor.
Councilman Cathy. Nothing. Councilwoman Lutz.
Just a reminder that the Engage Summit, which is a sub-council of the Endow Council, will be here in Casper on Saturday at the Yellowstone Garage from 8 to 4, or maybe 8 to 4:30. Breakfast and lunch included. It is actually a free event. It's the council is directed towards people between ages like 16 to 35, but everyone is absolutely welcome to come. It's just they're asking for 18 to 35 to be contributors and 35 plus or to be observers. So that event will be on Saturday.
Thank you. Councilman Bates.
Nothing.
Okay. Just a couple things for me. I had the pleasure of reading a proclamation at the James Reeb Memorial Mural that is located at the back end of the Wold building between the parking garage and our Davis Street Station. I strongly encourage people to take a look at it. It celebrates the life of a true hero that grew up here in Casper and sacrificed his life for the civil rights movement back in 1965. And he left his family and went to assist those efforts and was killed for his presence there and his statement of support. And he played a significant role in getting the Civil Rights Act passed. Also want to congratulate the Boys and Girls Club on a very successful fundraising event last week and encourage people to support the Seton House in their efforts to develop a new program, job training program, via their Little Black Dress fundraising event that I believe, I don't have the exact date. I think it's in November, but I'm not sure. So, And I think that's it. So a notice of an executive session will take place at this date, and during this meeting was given. We have personnel matters and property acquisition to discuss. Therefore, the chair would entertain a motion to adjourn into executive session, and at the conclusion of that executive session, to reconvene this regular meeting for purposes, solely for purposes of adjournment of this regular meeting. Motion?
So
Moved by Councilman Huber, seconded by Councilman Friel. There being a majority of members present and a motion to adjourn into executive session having been moved and seconded, and that motion requiring a 2/3 majority of the council present, please cast your vote. A greater than 2/3 majority of the council present voted in favor of the motion. We are hereby adjourned to an executive session. Did we vote, Crystal? I'm sorry, did I skip the vote? Okay, all right.